you so much for joining us. This is the first of many community forums for the middle school building project. It's really essential that we have involvement and engagement from our community these next several months and actually beyond. For those of you that may not know who I am, I'm Bridget Goff. I'm the superintendent of schools, and this is really an exciting opportunity for us. Although we're going through these unprecedented times, this is something that we can look forward to and that I'm very excited about. I just want to touch upon a couple of things before I turn it over to Mark Breen, our school committee member, and he's also the chair of our school building committee. First, our agenda has two parts. We'll talk for the first 30 minutes just about the entire process of the Byrne Middle School project, where we are, how we got here, and where we are going, and a little bit about our decision-making process. And then at about approximately 7:30, we'll move on to the visioning process. So that's that piece of what could be our visioning and feedback that's going to be, David Stevens will be talking to you about the visioning of how we envision teaching and learning in the middle schools in Walpole. We'll take a two-part, at the end of the first session, we'll open it up for questions, a Q&A, and then also at the end of the second session, and then wrap it up talking about how you can stay informed and involved. It's important to also introduce our project team. You can see, which is known as the Walpole School Building Committee. You can see on the left-hand side, really our school building committee is a cross-representation of both community members and town officials. And then over on the right, we have with us our Compass project management team. On with us and joining us tonight is Tim Bonifante. He's the principal of Compass. Brian Jarvis will be speaking tonight. He's the project director. And Tony Pina, he's also the project manager. So thank you for joining and participating in this. We also have our architect, Tape, Chris Blesson, the principal architect. He will also be presenting as well. And then finally, last but certainly not least, David Stevens, who is from New Vista Design, who will talk about our visioning process. You'll also notice that through this evening that we've spent the past several years really working with the Massachusetts School Building Authority, or what will be called the MSBA. And we look forward to our continued work with them. We expect to get a substantial grant, which is grant money back from our taxes. The MSBA is a dedicated revenue stream of 1 penny on every tax dollar. And really what the MSBA does is they collaborate with municipalities to invest in funding these right size, really most fiscally responsible and educationally appropriate solutions to create these safe and sustainable learning environments. And I really want to reiterate, we're looking for sustainable learning environments. We are very lucky to have this opportunity. When we submitted our statement of interest, over 70 of them, I believe, were submitted, and there were only 12 that were accepted into the eligibility period. And we were one of them. It was actually only three middle schools. And then the following year, there were only one of four schools invited into the feasibility period. And you'll see the timeline in a second. This is something that I'm truly invested in, both personally and professionally. For those of you who may not know a little bit about my background, prior to the superintendency, I was administrator at Byrne Middle School, both principal and assistant principal. And before that, I was a teacher at Byrne Middle School. And before that, I was a former student at Byrne Middle School. So I'm also a client. And the school looks the same now as it did back then. So I'm really excited about the opportunities and the possibilities of how we can move our students forward in a 21st century learning environment of collaboration and collective inquiry. So I want to turn it over to Mark Breen, who will explain a little bit about the background of how we got here into the process and the pipeline. Mark.
Thank you, Bridget. I was lost there for a moment, so.
That's okay. Can you hear us?
So hopefully people can hear me.
I can hear you now.
As mentioned, Walpole is currently exploring the issue of our aging middle school buildings. Both Bird and Johnson report. The issue of these aging buildings was first formally raised in the 2013 McGuire report and again in the 2016 secondary school space study report. The school district submitted statements of interest to the MSBA, the Massachusetts School Building Authority. In 2018, the MSBA accepted Walpole into its program, agreeing to support a feasibility study that would explore the deficiencies of the Bird Middle School, as well as the possibility of consolidating both middle schools, given the potential economies. In November of 2018, Walpole Town Meeting approved the funding for this study. Of note, acceptance into the MSBA program is very competitive, as it comes with the potential of a substantial reimbursement estimated at between 30 and 50% of the total project cost. We formally entered the feasibility project in October of 2019. Compass Project Management was approved as the owner's project manager in February of 2020, and TAP A was chosen to lead the project, to lead the project design, by the designer selection panel in May of 2020.
I just want to make sure he's still on, or if he's finishing. I know he was breaking up, so we'll give it a second.
Bridget, I'm here.
Okay. Are you all set?
I went through my spiel.
Perfect. Okay. No, I did. I know that you ended with the feasibility study, so you're good. I'm gonna keep going then. Okay. Thank you. Okay. So just what I wanted to do before I kind of pass the baton over to Compass, that built in 19. Oh,
can't start my video for some reason either.
Okay, that's okay. I'm going to continue, Mark. Thanks. So built in 1961, Bird Middle School really is at the near the end of its functional life, with structural and systemic deficiencies. And we have a layout that doesn't support the programmatic requirements. And our 21st century learning, like I mentioned, is critical and creative thinkers, collaboration and communication. And Bird Middle School no longer supports the adequate delivery of education and programming needs of the students of Walpole. I just want to remind you that, I keep talking about Bird Middle School, and you might be thinking, wait a minute, isn't this a middle school project? Just have to remember with the statement of interest in MSBA, selected Bird Middle School as the school to either build a new school or to renovate, but with the appetite of consolidation of the two middle schools. So you'll find that we'll be talking about the vision of the middle school, but these were the deficiencies that were noted in the statement of interest that was able to get us into the MSBA pipeline. So just please remember that it is the middle school. We will be looking at potential options, and I know that some people, there has been a rumor out there that we're going to take the two middle schools, put it into the high school, and build the high school. That is not happening. That is not what at MSBA. The high school is staying where it is. We're focusing on the middle schools and looking at a location for the middle school. But I just wanted to talk a little bit about, and I've highlighted a couple areas, but where I mentioned the building in the infrastructure. So just a couple of examples. Like, for example, the auditorium hasn't been updated since 1961. And as a result, there's much in there that's in the state of constant state of repair. There are many areas and rows, seats that are broken, and really improvements that would trigger these code required upgrades, as well as infrastructure upgrades. The auditorium and the cafeteria, for those of you that have been in there, know it's in one location, and that auditorium sits in the middle of the cafeteria, splitting it, and we're creating a space issue. And that's when I'll get into these lack of spaces, because what that does is it limits to have assembly time, and it also limits having a music program that's designated in one room for all of our music opportunities. We've talked about infrastructure and pipes bursting on more than one occasions to flooding into the cafeteria that's cascaded down the stairs. And although the town is consistently invested in the proper maintenance and upkeep at the building, at the age of the building, it's really reached the end of its functional life of all of its major systems. We do know, like, for example, the parking is insufficient. There's 69 parking spaces. That's including 2 handicapped and 3 visitor spaces. And there's over 70 staff members. So it really impacts our ability to get families in, and family and community engagement is very important to us. It's aligned in our strategic plan. And if you have ever been to Bird Middle School and you know what the traffic's like with circulation, and you probably have experienced gridlock at one time or another. Although we continue to find ways to accommodate significant space issues, many of the classrooms are not adequate. We've created alternative spaces throughout the years. We've converted, and for example, an art classroom into a severe special needs classroom in order to keep our students in district, and we relocated that art room. We divided the technology into 2 rooms in order to make a media center. And we utilized materials from the old Walpole library in order to furnish that and to keep it up and running. And then upstairs where the media was located, sorry, somebody muted me by mistake. Sorry, somebody had muted me. And so looking at those 2 rooms, you have one to keep, again, keeping students in district, and then also creating other classrooms. Inadequate electrical system, which inhibits our ability to add technology. And then just the overall programmatic deficiencies, former closets that are now teacher workstations, 1 meeting space for the entire building. The size of the main office and our guidance office, being able to have students come in, and last thing we want to do is compromise confidentiality, putting students in uncomfortable settings. Really, these reconfigurations of spaces described were never designed for instruction and really have a significant impact on our educational programming. None of the science rooms contain proper connections for gas lines and drainage. And additionally, many of the science experiments really are conducted in the hallways. So really looking at these classrooms that are not conducive to what we call as project-based learning. So in other words, there are no empty rooms, and there's really that lack of flexible learning spaces in design that prohibits collaborative learning. So speaking of, and I know I keep talking about space being an issue and space deficiencies, I think this graphic is pretty powerful. And looking at it, the red highlights spaces that are 15% less than the MSBA guidelines. So when you look at this graphic, 2/3 of the school does not meet MSBA guidelines. I know there's a few in there that's yellow, and when I was looking at that in terms of where those were located, one on the 2nd floor at the bottom, at the very bottom at the right, that is a special needs program where we house a lot of our special needs students in order to keep students in district. So even for that particular space and that purpose, it's even though it's a space that's allotted for more than the MSBA for what it is utilized for, you could claim that you need a larger space. And then the other one, the other large space on the 1st floor, the reason that is bigger is because way back when, that was known as our sewing room, when we had sewing and foods program. So that had to house all the closets and the sewing machines. So again, it was what it was designed for when it was built at that time. And I think the other one, the small one, you might say, well, why is that space larger than MSBA? That is where I believe we house all of the science equipment for the entire building. So if a teacher needs lab materials, they have to go down to that closet and be able to get that out, and that's where it's housed throughout the building. So I'll turn it over to, I believe, Brian, correct?
Thank you, Bridget. Hello, everybody. I'm Brian Jarvis from Compass Project Management. I'm the director for Compass on this project. I'm also a resident. I was project manager on the police, fire, and senior center projects here in town. And I've had two boys that have gone through Bird Middle School, so I'm intimately familiar with the existing conditions of the school. Bridget and Mark touched on a little bit about where, how the process has come along the last few years relating to the MSBA and the current condition of the Bird Middle School. And she did touch on that the MSBA did approve a dual enrollment study to look at both renovating a new Bird as well as a possible combined option with one middle school. I'm going to talk a little bit about the process of where we are going. There is ability to ask questions as we move through this. We will take a formal question and answer session at the end of this section, but if you can use the chat function at the bottom of the Zoom bar, the Q&A function, we'll gather those questions up at the end so you don't have to wait. You just type those as it comes to you. I'll try to get through this quickly. There are some links at the end of the presentation that'll get you more detailed information regarding the MSBA process and some of the information related to the project that are on the website. So I'll go through these slides quickly and we'll get to more of the pictures at the end with the architects and the designers. So in general, where are we going? The MSBA process is a very formal process. It's very well done. It's very thorough. It's intended to be thorough, detailed, and transparent. We're currently in the feasibility schematic phase, which are highlighted in blue. The feasibility study phase is where we start to look at options and then narrow those options down to a preferred solution. The current schedule for the project is to get to that point by February of this coming year. Once that preferred option is approved by the MSBA, it moves into a schematic design phase where you basically do about 30% of the design, enough to come up with a project scope, budget, and schedule, which will take us through the end of next summer. And at that point, the MSBA will kind of lock the town into the formal agreement for the design of the building related to scope, budget, and schedule. And that's what gets presented to town meeting and eventually a vote, townwide vote next fall, which is where the town decides to move forward with the project and fund it. From there, the design phase will kick off, taking about a year. And then construction will start possibly at the winter of 2022, again, depending on how long the design phase takes. And depending on the scope of the project, construction could be anywhere from 15 months to 2 years, taking you into the summer of 2024. This is a little bit more detailed of the feasibility schematic phase, which is highlighted in blue. We're about a third of the way through. As Mark mentioned, we came on board in February. TAPE was selected as designer in June. There are 3 major deliverables to the MSBA in this phase, and we'll get into that detail in a little bit. Basically, the PDP, or preliminary design plan, is your list of options. The preferred schematic is narrowing those options down to what the town prefers as the preferred solution. And then the schematic design report, which we talked about, where you set your budget leading up to a town meeting. Next slide. Some of the details of those deliverables, and again, we won't get into very much detail. You can look those up on the MSBA's website. The preliminary design PDP deliverable we're at right now is really important because that's where the district actually defines their educational program. That's how they see or how they vision middle school education being delivered in Walpole. And that's the document that the design is then based upon, and the MSBA checks back against that document to make sure that the building is designed on how Walpole plans to deliver education and that you're not asking for more than you need. You put that plan together and start creating spaces of how a building might lay out, whether that's an addition, a renovation, or a new building. You look at existing conditions and anything that might be required on the site, such as traffic, access roads, utilities, things of that nature, parking, circulation. There's preliminary evaluation of scenarios, which is the phase we're in right now. The MSBA is making us look at 7 possible scenarios, and that includes both the 450 single school enrollment plus a 905 student enrollment for a combined option. And the key takeaway here is we're just gathering and looking at options. There are no major decisions with this deliverable. The MSBA basically wants to see what are all the options that you're going to look at. What is your educational program to support a preferred solution? And those are due to the MSBA by the end of November. That's what the project team has been working on throughout the summer, and we'll wrap up this early part of fall. The next deliverable is the preferred schematic report. And really the takeaway here is that you're going to narrow those options down by February to what we consider to be the preferred option. Do we want to go with a renovation of Bird? Does it need to be a new Bird? Does it need to be some type of a combined school? That decision needs to be made and substantiated to the MSBA. And again, you're looking to come up with an option that you believe is going to deliver the most cost-effective and educationally appropriate solution to the town, and that is the MSBA's mantra. That's a major decision, and that's due to the MSBA by the end of February. And then you move into the schematic design report, which we've already talked about. And the key takeaway there, which would be next August, is again setting that budget and the schedule, and also finalizing the maximum grant that the MSBA will agree to with the town of Walpole. Next slide. As we mentioned, there are 7 possible scenarios that we're looking at. 3 of them are related to a Bird-only type scenario: renovate the existing building, add to the existing building and renovate, or a new building, a new Bird, standalone Bird school. There are also 4 possible consolidated options that we're looking at, or scenarios. Add reno at the Bird site, a new building at the Bird site for a combined school, with the same scenarios at Johnson. And add reno to Johnson, that would be a combined building, or a new building at Johnson, that'll be a combined building. The town, through some of its previous municipal projects, basically has determined that these are the only 2 sites that could really house a new middle school project. The MSBA is requiring these 7 solutions to be looked into. But the thing to keep in mind is any one of these scenario solutions is going to have multiple concepts of what that solution might look like. So there might be multiple renovation concepts, multiple addition concepts, et cetera, underneath any one of these. And those will eventually get evaluated down to a preferred solution. Next slide. So the decision-making process that we implement on our projects that correspond to the MSBA's decision-making process really funnels everything down to that solution. You start with gathering as much information on those scenarios as possible. With those options analysis, you come up with criteria that is important to the town and the district of how to evaluate that criteria. You get the research and the engineering done to look in those different options and give the building committee the data and the information it needs to evaluate and rate those options. And then eventually narrow that down to 3 or 4 that are really the front runners, whether that's renovation, add reno, or a new building, in this case, a single school or a combined school. And then narrow that down to one solution that's the preferred solution that we talked about. And that's all done, led by the building committee, but in conjunction with the other town boards and committees, especially the school committee, who are vital in putting together the educational program, and other boards in town, such as FinCom and the select board. Getting through the evaluation is very important. These are the criteria. These are examples of criteria the town or the district will come up with. We'll basically create a matrix that's very apparent as to what option is rising to the top for the district and the town. You put the possible options across the top. The town and the building committee come up with criteria down the left side, and you start to rank those options of how well they meet those criteria. And things that have come up on school projects is, does the option support your educational goals, student health and wellness? Is it the best location for the school? Is it the best location on the site relating to circulation or parking or access to fields? Does it support community use? I know that's an important aspect of Walpole. The schools are heavily used by community groups in town, as well as rented to out-of-town groups. What is the option that's least disruptive to students during construction? This is going to be a construction project one way or the other, and school will be in session. What impacts those students the least? What has the least impact on the surrounding community as far as traffic or busing, after school programs, and or the environment? And finally, and oftentimes the most important, what are the costs of the project to what you actually get out of it from a value from both the student's perspective and the community perspective? So these types of criteria will be placed up against the options. And then as you start to fill out these options, you'll see, the most advantageous ones start to go green, the least advantageous are red, and it becomes very clear. It's a very good visual tool to present to the communities to show what options are rising to the top. Next slide. So that was a lot of information quickly. You've come a long way in the last several years, and we have a long way to go. But over the next few months is actually a very critical stage for the project, and that's why we're reaching out to the community and getting everyone involved. The goal is that this process is as open and transparent and informative as possible, so that everyone understands the decisions that the town needs to make in the next few months and over the next year or so. Getting to a preferred solution by February, there's going to be a lot of meetings coming up, kicking off at school committee, the building committee, other town forums, and we'll probably have another community forum sometime in early December as we start to talk about options. But the reality is the conversation on options and the ed program and whether or not a consolidated school makes sense for Walpole is starting in October. They'll continue all the way through November. We'll get that initial list of options into the MSBA. We'll start to narrow those list of options prior to the holidays, Christmas holiday, winter holidays, have a second public forum to talk about some of those potential shortlisted options. And then by January, the town really needs to be in a position to vote what they think the preferred solution might look like, especially around consolidation of schools, because that solution will have to get advanced to a point in February to turn that into the MSBA by the end of February. So there'll be a lot of meetings coming up, a lot of public meetings. We ask you to stay involved, to stay tuned in, and we'll get as much information out there as we can so everyone's up to speed. So I know we were running a little bit late. So we'll take as many minutes as we can to get through some questions. If those of you might have had Q&A questions and sent them in, we'll read those and try to get you some answers. We do want to get it over to the architect and the design team in the next couple minutes just to get through. They have a lot of great information that's a little bit more exciting than what we just went through. But if you don't get a chance to ask your question, or if we don't quite get to your answer, there is a project email address, middle school project, walpoleK12ma.us. Send a question or a comment into that. That is getting tracked. We're keeping track of all those. We'll get answers back to you, and then we'll be compiling a frequently asked questions list that'll be on the project's website, and we'll give you that link at the end of the show tonight. So Tony, any questions come in?
Well, we do not have any questions right now, unless someone wants to submit one. So we might be able to get back on.
Did a great job of explaining it.
Good. Would you like me to move to the next slide?
Yeah, if there are no questions, then we'll turn it over to Chris and TAP A Group and get them started.
Yeah, thanks. So I'm Chris from TAP A Architects, and with me tonight is David Stephen from Vista Design, and we are really excited to be engaged on Walpole Public Schools and the middle school for you all. And a lot of times when we join in on this conversation, sometimes we see questions like on the right, things like, why do we need a new school? And, kind of more interesting questions like, music, we have YouTube for that. Interestingly, some of these are not just anecdotal. It's sometimes it's happening right now with remote learning, trying to find all kinds of ways to get kids active and engaged. But the real answer is that the schools for 21st century education are being asked to do a lot more than what schools did yesteryear. And your school historically has done a good job for what it can do, but as Bridget was saying earlier, it's sort of reached the end of its useful life. And so some of the things that are being layered into the conversation for 21st century education are these things like collaboration, critical thinking, communication, and creativity. And those are really referred to as the 4 C's that get layered into above what used to be, the core academic things that schools did. And David Stephen will talk more about that in a minute. But one of the, you can go to the next slide, Bridget. One of the interesting facts about school now is that we're learning a lot through COVID, actually, and how schools are really shaped in the social and emotional side of learning, which has become a pretty big focus for schools and middle schools, particularly because it's one of the, the middle school years are just really challenging emotionally and socially. And so learning how to adapt the community to community and making a community in the building, which furthers a student's approach and ideas around citizenship, are really key to having successful education in the 21st century. And the Bird School doesn't really do this well for you because it's so compartmentalized and doesn't offer a lot of these types of spaces. You can go to the next slide. And so, we look back at when the Bird School was built in the 20th century, and you have things like these images you see here, which represent 20th century work. And David's going to talk about this a little bit more as well. But the idea here is that a long time ago, 50 years ago, 60 years ago, that people were sitting in rows learning how to do jobs that were fairly repetitive and born out of that industrial revolution kind of mentality. And so school kind of evolved to train, students for the work world that they are going to be entering into. You can go to the next slide. And it just so happens that in the 21st century, these images are from places like Google and Facebook. And, those aren't the only places that people can work. There are still very important blue collar jobs out there. There's still lots of other things that need to be learned and skills. And there's still people working in cubicles, right? So these are just some of the horizons of what kids are being faced with in the world and workforce that they're going to be going to. And so even current graduates are being challenged by these new situations. And so not to dwell on this is not the kind of design we're proposing for a Bird Middle School, but just to talk about how the evolution of work has changed. And so you can go to the next slide. And so therefore the evolution of school is changing as well. So the bottom picture on the left is, circa 1900s, and, kids look very well behaved to me. And they, they're all in rows doing the same thing. Some of them are different ages, but the image on the right to go alongside of it is not terribly different from that, although it doesn't have students in it. But the idea here is that that's actually a picture taken from Bird Middle School just last month. And, it's set up for COVID, but the idea that you can kind of extrapolate here is that the things that are happening in that school are very limited to the physical plant that's in it. And so we can go to the next slide if you would, please. In 21st century education, we look for more things that produce opportunities to allow collaboration and creativity, and things like STEAM learning, which is a pedagogy that Bridget had in one of her slides earlier that allows for that cross-discipline component. You can go to the next slide. And just new ways of situating classrooms so that they can produce different types of work environments and quickly be agile enough to change the mode of teaching and learning very quickly, and allow for differences in that, because we also know that not all students learn the same and not all teachers teach the same. And so having some variety can help keep people engaged and focused. And those last two slides were new schools, and you can go to the next image. And this was actually a renovation of a 20th century school, and which infused a lot of 21st century ideas. So the idea of having presentation and working on the communication of things that you're doing in school, the real work that goes on, learning how to communicate those ideas effectively and to an audience, and then also the communication of ideas and through media, and turning older spaces into newer spaces that can do a lot for you in the digital world is a strong aspect of things we'll be looking for when we go through some of those renovation schemes. And go to the next slide. And again, some renovation ideas here, just to highlight that we can do new or renovated and still achieve a lot inside of them. The left picture there is taking a traditional classroom and really just kind of transforming it into this learning hub that allows for a lot of flexibility. There's a lot of whiteboard in that room, and it goes around the corners. So, if you had the world's longest formula, you could probably write it in this room and get a lot of use out of that. And then the right side is just an image of how we can infuse technology into these spaces as well. So you can go to the next slide. So with that, I think I'll turn it over to David Stephen, who will walk us through all the visioning and the ideas around what school could be as we sort of set the palette. And I'll be taking a lot of notes during this because it's interactive and allows you all to engage in the process. So, David.
All right. Can everybody hear me okay? All right. Yes. And can everybody see my screen? I just, we got some thumbs up there. All right, good. Well, hello, everybody. My name is David Stephen. I'm with New Vista Design, and I'm what is called the educational programmer on the design team. working with Chris and his team. And I'll be sharing some highlights from the educational visioning process that I have been helping to facilitate with the district. Now, this is a process that I do with a lot of communities in the MSBA feasibility phase of this process. I have a background as both a licensed architect, but also a K-12 educator. And my job is really to help communities to establish a very clear educational vision and architectural priorities that are going to help them to get the most out of the MSBA opportunity. And in this particular process, we engaged a group of 35 Walpole administrators and teachers. And we had first met with the educational leadership team. And then with this larger group, we first talked about educational priorities and established those, and then connected them to ideas about design and what's possible. So I have about 30 minutes with you here where I'm going to show you some of the ideas that came up. I'm also going to be asking for your feedback along the way. And to do this, you're going to need your smartphone or another window open on your computer. We're going to use a program called Mentimeter that's going to allow us to kind of interact with some of the slides that I'm showing you. And I'll tell you about that when we get to it. I am going to be sharing a lot of information here, and just wanted to reiterate that all of this information will be available on the project website. This PowerPoint will be available. And as Brian said, we look at this as an ongoing conversation where we want your feedback, not just tonight, but as we continue to go through this process. So this is a process that the MSBA feels like is very important because we talked about the educational plan, and this is a document that spells out very clearly not only where the school is now, but where it would like to go over the next 10, 20 years. We need to look at these buildings as 50-year buildings, and we know that things are going to change a lot over the next 5, 10, 15 years. So we need buildings that are going to be flexible and adaptable. So as part of that, we also want to build on the district agenda and connect that to the priorities that are being established within the education plan. Now, the MSBA has a very clear template of spaces that it suggests that you have in your building, but it wants you to be able to think really creatively about how to create adjacencies that are going to help you really get a very flexible building. I wanted to say a few things about any renovated or new or renovated plus an addition facility that goes through the MSBA process, because many of us who work in schools are, just kind of really concerned with some of the basics. We want heat and cooling that works. We want natural light. And those are all going to be present in any renovated or new school. In fact, a renovation through the MSBA process is what we call a gut renovation with all new systems. All of these schools are going to be ADA compliant. They're going to be paying a lot of attention to active and passive security measures. We know that's incredibly important. We need to have good sized and flexible classrooms, because it's not just the teacher up at the front teaching anymore. It's lots of small groups that are doing varied activities within the classroom. We need to integrate special education, enrichment, and the arts throughout the school, make it readily accessible. We know that this comes with new furniture and technology, and that technology has to be seamless and ubiquitous, just where you need it, when you need it. We want to be thinking about buildings that are sustainable with passive and active measures, and that also gets into cost, and both upfront cost, but also long-term maintenance cost and how much it costs to operate the building. We want to be thinking about improved acoustics and indoor-outdoor connectivity. So these are all things that at the beginning of this process, we just, sort of said to folks, don't worry about this, but let's think sort of aspirationally about what you would love to see in a new or renovated school building for Walpole. We want to be able to use the MSBA template thoughtfully, but this is really about being cost-effective and practical. It's not about being trendy. It's about using every square inch of the building, because every inch is wired now. We want to be thinking about multi-use and adaptable spaces, and making sure that the school is a valuable resource for the community and it really supports 21st century teaching and learning both now and as it will evolve. So Chris was talking a little bit about that. We are still tasked with reading, writing, and arithmetic and the 4 core subject areas, and making sure that our kids are literate and numerate, but we also are thinking a lot about social emotional learning, making sure that students are developing confidence in their abilities to communicate, to think critically, to collaborate, to be part of a school community as well. And connected to that is the idea of problem and project-based learning and STEM and STEAM. So these are very popular kind of approaches that people are taking to try and engage students in more hands-on application of the content that they're learning. And that means that in terms of educational delivery, we're looking at very student-centric spaces where active and passive learning can happen. And when I say passive, that's our more traditional, you're receiving information from the teacher, but we also are actively learning. We want our environments to be flexible. We want one-to-one technology environments, but we may have 2 to 3 devices for a student 5-10 years from now. We want to be collaborative, and we also want to have quiet spaces where kids can focus. And we want to not only honor the subjects that we're teaching, but also integration of those subjects through application, through project-based methodologies. So one of the first things that we did in our workshop with Walpole administrators and teachers is to create a set of future-ready learning goals. What are the learning goals that are most important to the district based on what you're doing now and where you see yourself going? And those 5 C's that Chris mentioned are all covered here: critical thinking, collaboration, communication, creativity, citizenship. Also this idea of learning mindset, kids being more self-directed, developing kind of resiliency and the ability to persevere, learning how to learn. And that is really what it means to be agile in today's global economy, is to have the skills to learn on your own, to unlearn and relearn things. Digital literacy is a big part of that. And of course, mastery of core academic content is really the foundation for everything, because that's still sort of what this is all in service of. So I have 2 pages here of priorities that were established during the visioning process. I'm going to share those, and then I'm going to be asking for you to share some of your priorities. So the ones that came up first and foremost was really supporting innovative curriculum and programming. Also, community use and access. We really need to be thinking about this building as a community resource that's used 24/7, after hours, on weekends. Comfortable and adaptable classrooms that adapt to different methodologies. Grade level neighborhoods, the idea of, especially in a middle school, to create grade level communities where students are known well, they may be cohorted in a certain way and share teachers. That enables them to really kind of get to know those kids well and feel a sense of ownership. Safety and security, got to feel safe, and we got to have those safety measures. Flexible and multi-purpose spaces. So some of those big ticket spaces like your cafeteria and your media center, we're really looking at as fulfilling lots of different functions and being available to the community. Collaborative spaces and quiet spaces. We talk a lot about collaboration, but we also have to be thinking about kids being able to get quiet, get focused. And so we have a variety of spaces that we want to put in this school. Accessibility has to be accessible to students and teachers of all different physical and educational abilities and orientations. Sustainable, both passive and active measures. Special education support. We used to have what we called pull-out special education, where students went to one end of the building for these resources. We now do push-in. It's integrated throughout the school, and those spaces become really integral to the general classroom space as well, and students don't feel so separate, whatever services they might be getting. Outdoor learning spaces, we want to maximize the use of your outdoor spaces, maybe create an outdoor classroom. Of course, that connects to PE and fitness. Science spaces need to be flexible. All perimeter stations, nothing fixed. Again, we want to be looking at spaces as really flexible. Student display and exhibition, really celebrating the work that's going on in the school. And finally, the idea of having a hands-on shop or maker space. So these were some of the things that really came up in our workshops. And now I want to check in with you all. And so the way this works is, if you on your smartphone or on another window in your computer go to www.mentee.com, www.msba.com, right up here at the top, and you type in these 7 numbers, 4960922, then you will get to this slideshow, and you will be able to submit multiple kind of ideas about your priorities. And we're going to do 3 separate kind of takes on this. We're going to be thinking about what your educational priorities are, your architectural priorities, and your community related priorities. So what I'm going to do is go now to the first one. The first prompt is, when you think about your top educational priorities for Walpole Middle School, what are the things that come to mind? What do you want to make sure that this building supports? What are the programs that are most important for your families, for your students, or the approaches to teaching and learning? So if people could take a moment to get to that, what we'll do is we'll stay on each slide for 3 or 4 minutes. But again, this is just the beginning of a conversation. You can send more ideas about this, and let's just see what people are thinking about. So certainly collaborative spaces, and a lot of those in-between spaces between classrooms we can think of maybe as collaborative. Small group spaces with hands-on learning. Science for sure, we're going to be having all sorts of labs. Access to the newest technology, and we need to have a robust technology infrastructure that's going to continue to support the new stuff that gets created. Maker spaces. Yep, a maker space is definitely part of this MSBA template. We want to support rigorous learning opportunities that make Walpole competitive to neighboring towns. STEAM, social emotional learning. Social emotional learning, a big part of that is that feeling of belonging, where kids feel like they really have a place in the school and a number of adults who know them well. And we can do that, we can support that architecturally. State-of-art capabilities and technologies, excellent science labs, robust offerings. STEM for girls, for sure. Music spaces, band, that all comes within the MSBA template. I will say that I work in a lot of states across the US. The MSBA has the most thoughtful platform for designing new schools and supporting new school development. And they have a very generous template in terms of making sure that you have the spaces that you need. Enrichment, music, language, robotics, 21st century skill building, opportunities supported by the latest evolving technology. Learning neighborhoods, we're going to talk a bunch about them. All right, I'm going to keep going on to the next one, which is architectural priorities. What's most important for you architecturally about a renovated or a new Walpole Middle School? What are the features, the architectural features, or the elements of design that you think are really important? Natural light, that came up first. All of the classrooms are going to have natural light. We're going to filter that light into all spaces in the school. Modern but fits with local charm, sure. Quality HVAC, definitely. Bright, welcoming, fresh air, more than ever, that's important right now. Open spaces, flexible classroom seating. We're really looking at the larger classrooms in general. Bridget showed you that graphic with the number of classrooms and other spaces that were undersized. MSBA classroom spaces are 850 to 950 square feet so that you can have really flexible arrangements of things going on in there. Wonderful classroom windows, outdoor learning, environmental design, state-of-art purifiers and humidifiers for sure, designed for walking bikers. These are all things that came up in the visioning process and things that we're going to be thinking about. Practical spaces for arts and music, good airflow, comfortable small group spaces, and a timeless building for sure. All right, let's go to one more, and that is your top community priorities. So what do people think about as you think about this as a resource for the community? What are the things that are most important to you? Meeting spaces, for sure. And I'm going to say that when we think about community access, we're really looking at more public and private zones within any school building where you can close off other areas of the school and make it very safe, keeping the fields intact, kids having pride in their school building, sure. Separate entrance for gym and auditorium, and we might actually also for for the cafeteria and for the media center. We may see those as community functions. Safe voting access, sure, a place that's welcoming, that we can be proud of, good size gym and basketball court, inviting safe areas and safe sheltering opportunities during disasters. Place where musicals can be had, athletic events, meetings, where community members can go. Yep. Performance space that could host students and community events, gathering spaces, extracurricular spaces, safe reception area, combined middle school. Okay. And a community garden for distributing produce. All right, great. So again, if you have more ideas that you want to share, feel free to send them in. I'm going to move on now because I am conscious of time. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to talk about what we call design patterns. And design patterns are simply ways that we can approach design within schools. And we like to share them in this visioning process to get people thinking out of the box, because we have a pretty set idea of what schools are: classrooms, hallways, big ticket items that are shared spaces. But we want to be thinking about more agile collections of spaces. Now, you'll see in all these slides, someone got to it. You can put a thumbs up, you can put a heart if you love it, you can put a thumbs down if you just don't think so. At the very end, I'm going to share with you the 20 design patterns that were prioritized and that are going to be sort of really looked at closely as we look at different alternatives for this building. I do want to say, what I'm going to show you now are not solutions. This is not the design of the Walpole Middle School. These are mostly MSBA schools that have been designed and built in the last 5 years, just to show you what this sort of idea represents. So classroom neighborhoods, no more square footage, but what we have here is actually a neighborhood, because we have what's called a team room and windows that look out onto that team room, a teacher planning area, special education that's integrated. And what you have then is a neighborhood that is more than the sum of its parts, and it becomes a small learning community that makes the school feel smaller. Agile classrooms, we're going to be thinking about, it doesn't mean a lot of bells and whistles. We want lots of natural light, flexible furniture, chairs maybe that can stack on top of each other, adjustable height maybe for desks, good storage so that you can just put it behind maybe sliding whiteboard walls. Now, this is a movable wall between two classrooms. When you close it or open it, it's just as good. When you close it, it's just as good as a solid wall, but it does give you flexibility. That's something that we sometimes build into some of these neighborhoods. Breakout and quiet spaces. These could be spaces within the classroom that are window nooks where you can go read a book. They could be nooks in the hallway that don't even have a wall or a door, or they could be places that are in between classrooms that allow you to do small group work. You could do testing in there, you could do enrichment work, you could do targeted intervention work, and it's right next to the classroom. The idea of clusters of learning. Here you have a cafe and a gym. This is the Denver School of Science and Technology. This whole area can become a community center, and the whole academic area can be closed off. But the academic neighborhoods contain, in this case, these are 4 core subject areas, plus a meeting space or a studio space that everybody shares, like a living room, teacher space. So it gives you, again, more than kind of like the sum of its parts. Community access, this is the West Bridgewater Middle High School. And here you see the gym, the kitchen, the auditorium, the band, the video lab are all accessible. And the areas with the academic wings can be closed off. Safety and security. We want to be thinking about a number of chances to, first of all, observe who's coming into the school, not let them in if we don't want to let them in, or maybe allow them to drop off their students' lunch without actually coming into the school. So we want to be thinking about that level of safety and security, as well as throughout the school, providing good visual access to things, and welcoming entry and arrival. We want to be thinking about what it feels like when you enter the school. Is there an overhang in inclement weather where you can stand and be outside of the rain? Do you get a sense when you enter in all the great things that are happening to the school? Does it feel welcoming? We want it to feel secure, but also welcoming. Sustainability. Now we're going to be looking at LEED and mass chips in terms of sustainable measures, and making sure that that we really perhaps integrate those measures into the idea of the building itself being a teacher, where teachers and students can interact with some of the systems in the building. But certainly we're going to be looking at that level of sustainability. Natural light, it was brought up. These are a number of classrooms that represent the idea of light shelves, that where you kind of reflect the light off the ceiling. You never have to almost never turn on the lights in a classroom like this. And of course they're on sensors, so you can really save a lot of energy. Indoor outdoor connections. We might have a makerspace with a garage door that goes out to a poured concrete platform to extend the learning outside, or an interior courtyard that extends from the cafeteria or something like that. Or we may think about outdoor classrooms. We could look at outdoor performance venues or meeting spaces, places outside of the cafe where you can be outside, but also sheltered from rain or snow. We like to think also about the idea of cafe forum. The idea that the cafeteria also serves as sort of the heart of the school, the hub of the school. It's not just used during lunch service. It can become an area for performance, in this case at Minuteman Tech, where you have a what we call a learning stair here that allows you to also gather, and also a place where it might become a study commons, or there might be project-based learning going on there beyond the lunch service. Ubiquitous technology. As I said, we want to have technology where you need it, when you need it. Generally, we're thinking about mobile technology that kids can move around with them. We might be having some larger format technology for things like 3D modeling or animation, and we want to be thinking about where that gets housed. The Media Center Learning Commons. Media Center is really the hub of many schools. This is the Gibbs Middle School, a renovation in Arlington, Massachusetts. And you can see it's got features of a typical library with the book storage, but also and individual areas for student work. But it's also got a maker space down below here and a project mezzanine with flexible furniture. So you can bring your classes there and you can have that as an extended learning environment. Maker spaces are things that a lot of schools have actual curriculum that are connected to that. And we talked about that a bunch in Walpole. This is the Beverly Middle School here, where this maker space has lots of great storage, very flexible furniture, and it's easily accessible from your classroom neighborhood. Of course, you need a lot of storage of bins and things like that when you're doing something like Project Lead the Way. Or we can think of classrooms themselves as being maker classrooms, where you have, again, good storage, lots of whiteboard space, maybe a sink or two, good technology. Here we have electrical that comes down from the ceilings, again, and furniture that can be arranged in lots of different ways. The best kind of tables for project-based learning and for small group learning are rectangular or square tables that can be grouped together to create large surfaces. Now in science labs, we're really thinking about perimeter stations so that all the stuff in the middle of the room can be moved around easily. So you're not locked into a particular way of using that lab. Extended learning spaces. These are kind of the between spaces. We've taken the hallway, we've made it a bit wider, put some furniture configurations in there. Here at West Bridgewater, we've got the Cyber Cafe. It's a great place for kids to go and do independent work. It's right outside of their media center. Distributed dining. This is at Essex Tech in Danvers. And what we see here is that we've got a large school of 1,400 students that is divided into small learning communities, into 4 small learning communities. And there's one main cafeteria, but there's some distributed dining venues that also become commons rooms for those small learning communities, but also allow you to have a more quiet dining venue. So there's a place for the whole school to come together, but also places for these small learning communities to come together. We want to be thinking about alternative and effective storage, lockers that don't feel institutional, but also good storage within classrooms. As we're thinking about more project-based learning, we want to be recognizing that that requires a lot of materials within the classroom. professional work areas for teachers. Now, this is something that not only gives teachers the chance to collaborate, but it also allows you to utilize your classroom better, because when you have a planning period, a teacher can be out of their classroom and that can be used by another teacher. So we get better utilization there. Almost at the end here. Enrichment spaces, of course, in this MSBA template, we will be getting physical education, music, art spaces, and varied performance venues, thinking about different areas where performances can happen. Display and exhibition, being able to celebrate student work. That could be 2D display or 3D display. So those were the 20 top design patterns that were selected by your visioning group, your educational working group. I've listed them all here, and I want to give you an opportunity now to just give us your best shot at you. If you go to this page on menti.com, you can choose your top, say, 5 to 10 design patterns that you're most excited about. And this will just give us a quick snapshot of what people are thinking. So let's take about 2 or 3 minutes to do that. And then we're going to transition to some questions. And when we were going through these design patterns with our visioning team, people were kind of saying, well, it's kind of hard to decide because we like a lot of these things. They're all pretty exciting, but give us your best shot at the things that really stand out to you as most kind of like, yeah, I really want that in this new or renovated school. Natural light is right up there at the top. Oh. Yeah, the classroom neighborhoods, we talked a lot about that in the visioning process because there is a team model, as you know, within the middle schools. And just to be able to facilitate the co-location, not only of classrooms, but also spaces like breakout rooms or an extended learning commons area or having bathrooms nearby. What that does is it allows you to have a small orbit for a group of students and teachers. And it really does create sort of a small learning community. And what we tend to do, especially in newer schools, is to see those small learning communities as kind of surrounding a core, a central core. So there's not a lot of kind of needing to walk through the building. Many of us have associations with schools where there's just like miles of corridors that we're walking through, and we spend a lot of time doing that. And it's also kind of distracting. All right, let's give this 2 more minutes in case there are any people who still want to contribute. Yeah, so classroom neighborhoods and agile classrooms definitely within our workshops came up also right up at the top. And again, a number of these things are just going to be given: safety and security, sustainability, ubiquitous technology, natural light. These are all things that we're just not going to design a building that doesn't have all those things. All right. Okay, 30 more seconds in case there are people that just want to make sure to get it in there. Okay, one more, and that's, are there other design patterns and features that are important to you that we haven't included? We'd love to hear that from you. If there are things that are particularly important to you, maybe a sculpture garden or a roof garden, something like that, whatever comes to mind. gender neutral bathrooms and locker rooms. You know what? I really need to put that on the givens because that's definitely going to be a given. Fostering emotional safety. And I do think that approach of the neighborhood approach and just the making the building feel really accessible, easy to navigate, building in visibility so that you really feel sense of connectivity, all those things contribute to emotional safety. Having a fitness room, that is in the template as well, outdoor athletic lights. Yes, there'll be a separate budget for your, well, it's connected, but it's a percentage of the budget that goes to site development. Rooftop garden, yep. Use of solar energy, parking, definitely gonna be thinking about parking, a green roof, yeah. None of these things are out of the realm of possibility, and most of them are things that we would definitely be considering. All right, I have used 31 minutes, so I'm gonna pass it back to Bridget here, who will do a little bit of a wrap up, but I don't know if there's also some Q&A that's gonna be going. Should I keep sharing? I'm going to keep sharing, Bridget, right? So we leave the screen out.
Yes, just keep that. This is just a reminder again of looking at the timeline because we as a district are really going to take this information from you, information going forward from all of our future public forums, and really roll it into our process because we need as many people input and involved in the decision making. So as you can see, there'll be future discussions on initial options and consolidation. Again, we'll continue those discussions in November, narrowing the options into December and the vote in January. So it's just showing the importance of continuing to stay involved, engaged, and to communicate. David, could you go to that next slide, please?
Yeah.
Thank you. And again, the importance of staying informed and involved. You can see up there's the project's website. We'll actually post this presentation, both of the presentations on the website. You can visit the MSBA website for additional information, just looking at the different phases that we're in. And then you can also ask any type of question or comment, and that goes right to all of us, that we can see it and be able to get you an answer.
We do actually have a few questions if the team would entertain answering them. They're fairly good questions. I did answer one, and as we started to trend a tiny bit ahead of schedule, I thought we could take these live. The one that I did answer, the question was, with possibly increased traffic on East Street, is there a plan to adjust the 27th/East Crossroad? I just responded back that there will be traffic studies performed during various stages of the project, and often these do affect planning for vehicular circulation to whatever building is finally decided upon.
Yeah, that is one of the intersections that's included in the study. That's a major intersection, I think, regardless of how big the school is, because we also want to look at better circulation at a standalone BERT or a renovated BERT as well.
The next question, and I'm just going to take these in order that they were submitted. Given the unexpected costs of the 2020-2021 school year, is there any concern regarding a possible delay of the project plan in light of potentially limited state funding, or is the timeline expected to stay on track?
So I can start on this one. The project is on track. The MSBA, when you invite the district into the program, the MSBA budgeting and projected funding has already been set when they invite the schools in. So it's really the schools that come into the process, obviously this year and after this year, where the MSBA might be taking on possibly fewer projects. But from a Walpole perspective, the funding is lined up, and then we'll lock in what the potential grant could be at that schematic design phase at the end of next summer.
Obviously, the other component too is the town voting. So
correct.
The town, votes to fund that project at the end of the schematic phase, then the project can just stay on track, obviously, schedule-wise. The next question is, many studies proved that pupils learning in smaller schools outperform those in larger schools. What is the plus of having a big middle school?
And I think I can talk about that one, then anybody else can feel free to jump in. I think David, you did a nice job talking about the grade level neighborhoods. So having a small feel in a larger school. I know teaming was brought up also in our visioning sessions that we had with staff, and that was important to them. And I know that will be reflected in the educational plan, and then also with the architect. With that being said, it's a good question that, you know, that's going to be part of our discussions when we look at the options that we have, when we look at consolidation and being able to give the community information about, you know, how to create a small feel if we consolidate into a larger middle school. We do know that districts and getting data from the surrounding districts that have a larger middle school of how they're able to keep the small school feel. And I know that, you know, David has been able to articulate that. I know Chris has, from his experience in designing several schools that were even, I believe, 5 through 8 schools, and Compass as well in their experience with larger schools.
I would add to that, Bridget, and to whoever asked the question, it's not just about a small school feel, it's about the school operating in ways that allow kids to be really well known. Because what the research shows in terms of about the small schools, kids feeling connected, being known well, teachers know their learning styles. So if you can create that, both architecturally and programmatically within the school, I think that that you can have the benefit of both. I think the reason why a lot of districts that are within the MSBA program are considering consolidation options are because of the funding from the MSBA and the ability to create a 21st century learning environment that reaches more students. And which is a huge advantage, because so many of our schools, as we know, are not outfitted to support 21st century delivery.
And some of the pluses in that related to operations are, you know, right now there's some professionals that are split between the Byrd and the Johnson. And so when you can connect schools together, you can take advantage of shared resources and make it more available to students in real time, which means better service at the end of the day. So
2 more questions. Lots of discussion about windows and natural light. How does that reconcile with the need for safety?
You want me to take that one?
You can start that one, Chris, and then I'll jump in.
Okay. So natural light is very important, and obviously that came up. It resonated with several people on this call tonight. The idea around safety in buildings, one of the things David actually hit on this earlier, was the active and passive strategies for safety. And one of the benchmarks for that, it's not the end all be all, but one of the benchmarks for that is a program called CEPTED, which is crime prevention through environmental design. And those strategies, which is easy to look that up, but you kind of pull some of those out in the educational environment, and some of them talk about how seeing with your own eyes and being seen with your own eyes helps create that community that folks the students and staff become accountable to. And that's the idea of citizenship within a community, citizenship within the school. And so those layers they're doing kind of simultaneous things where they can create safety just by changing the culture a little bit, but they can also allow natural light and borrowed light in different ways. And then the end of the day is that the more complex measures that we layer in are strategies that include different types of glazing and different ways to manage intrusion and things like that you know are quite complex and detailed, and we have security consultants that help us figure out how to section off the building and partition in ways that create safe environments. But that really, the natural light and things like that they actually go hand in hand and enhance one another. So I don't know if I hit that all, David, or if you had anything.
Yeah, no, you got a lot of great points there. Definitely, a lot of studies show that student performance greatly improves with natural light, both attention and sort of feeling of well-being, and also performance on standardized measures. So there's the exterior windows, and we may be concerned about exterior windows on the lower floor of the school. And a lot of that is through kind of safety measures where we have good visibility about who is near or on site on the school. But then there's also the interior windows, and that's a discussion that for every district I think is different, and because it's what you're comfortable with. And ironically, Sandy Hook, or not ironically, but Sandy Hook, the new building there has a lot of interior glass because of exactly what you said, Chris, creating a community that feels really connected. People know immediately who's around them. There's a sense of that safety of knowing who's there. When we put windows in the interior of a building for borrowed light to get light into the building, or to allow teachers to observe students in extended learning spaces, we always have blinds there. We always have the option to close off that window. And when we think about areas of refuge in a classroom, what would happen, what happens in a lockdown situation, we could be thinking about that too. So the actual interior glass, it doesn't have to be, you can get a lot of bang for your buck without a whole lot of actual, square footage of glass.
As part of the process, we always involve public safety. So public safety will be intimate throughout the design process, police, fire, as far as their recommendations and basically how they're able to service the community and the schools. So that gets baked into the equation as well.
All right, last question. Does anyone reach out to the principals of schools built in the last 5 years to ask what they would change or what was the best decision they made?
I can take that one. I'm glad somebody asked that one all the time. I started way back when I think Dedham Middle School first was built, and asking them what they liked about their building and what would they change. And just recently, we attended story of a building at the Situate, I believe middle school, and we had two school committee members, Jen Gayotsith and Nancy Galvin, along with school business administrator Mike Frisha, Patrick Shield, and I went there for the day. We also visited Beverly Middle School, I think Wakefield Middle School, and even Braintree. And again, asked them those specific questions. What's the best thing you like? But also, if you had to do it over again, what would you do differently? So we'll continue to do that.
And I would just add that this, again, is where the MSBA is a very thoughtful partner, because they're doing post-occupancy analysis on every single one of their buildings. And they're really trying to get it right. They're really trying to see, well, if we put in all this extra square footage to these extended learning spaces, do they really get used? The things that, they're really looking carefully at how to create the best, most effective template they can, realizing that it's not a one size fits all necessarily for each school who's going to have their own needs.
Any other questions, Tony?
No, that's all the questions. And I just wanted to let everyone know we had over 50 participants at one point.
Great, thank you. Well, I do thank everybody for coming. I think just as a reminder, the visioning, the option development, many more discussions to come. Our next step, I think, as Brian or someone mentioned, is really creating that 50-page document known as the education plan, where we're really articulating what we want teaching and learning to be in Walpole, and provide our designers with these guiding principles so they can design what our vision is. And it's really looking at the characteristics of what these designs can produce and really showing what's possible and how our schools are evolving. So we really appreciate your participation and your feedback, and please don't hesitate to continue to provide that feedback for us in the future. So thank you. Good night.
I
That's
think
it.
that brings
Thank
us
you,
to an
everybody.
end. Thank you
Have
all.
a good night.
Good night.
Good night.